We are into the double-digit weeks now of the NFL season. We just got done with week number 10. There you go, 10. And now we change the 0 to a 1 for week 11. You know where it's good for fantasy advice. You know where to come. If you guys are subscribing or watching this, you know where it's at. This is the FFSR, otherwise known, no, it's not a country, it's the Fantasy Football Stock Report. Chris Pearson here as always to give you guys guidance and advice going into this week. We are really getting into the nitty-gritty now of the fantasy season. Last week for me, I clinched a playoff berth. I got a big win. I beat the team with the best record in my league by 40 points. Handled them pretty well. Got some big performances from some big guys who have come up late, like one Riley Cooper. I'm telling you, he's the real deal. And, of course, some of my studs that have been good all year. So we're going to talk about a lot of these guys. The injury bug was big again last week for some guys. And some guys came back who really stepped up and did some big things in their debuts. Well, other guys that didn't do so much. So a lot to get to this week as we recap Week 10 and look into Week 11. Hopefully for you guys, you're looking to make that playoff push as well. For me, this was my 6th playoff berth now in the last 9 years. As you guys know, as I mentioned on my channel a lot, I won a title in 2010. My only title so far, but hopefully this is a year where I can make another push for a championship as well. So let's quickly get into quarterbacks for the week. Real quick, let's remind you guys who you won't have available this week, who are on a bye this week. The bye teams for this week are Dallas and St. Louis. So only 2 teams on byes, and the byes end in Week 12. That week you won't have Buffalo, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, or Seattle in Week 12. So that's what we're looking at there. But for only this week, Dallas and St. Louis. So you're not going to have Tony Romo. You're not going to have Des Bryant, DeMarco Murray. Kellen Clemens, if you use him for St. Louis, not going to have Zach Stacy at running back. Tavon Austin, you won't be able to use him after his big week last week. So not a whole lot here to lose. So you're still going to have some good guys out there with strong performances. So for those of us who are Romo owners, who can we find? Who can we rely on maybe to put in some options for you? Well, first let's recap the big names from last week. The top of the list, these are guys you rely on normally every single week. Drew Brees, Peyton Manning had huge weeks last week. I mean, the Saints just completely went buku on the Cowboys. Just dominated them in a 49-17 beatdown. I mean, Drew Brees, can you really bet against the Saints these days? Not really, especially not at home either. But just a complete dominating performance. Brees was 34-41 for 392 yards with 4 touchdowns. Had a passer rating of 139. Pretty sick. Only one other quarterback was higher, and surprisingly, that was Kellen Clemens with a 140.6. But that was the great performance he showed against the Colts, by the way. But Brees had 39 fantasy points. You're never going to get big weeks from Brees every single week. Now, the matchup this week, going up against San Francisco, it's a tough one. But then again, they're playing at home, and really these days, can you bet against Drew Brees at home? No, you can't. You're rolling with Drew Brees. Now, you're also going to continue to roll with Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning last week. Now, obviously, we know that Peyton is a little bit banged up. He got hit low again last week. He's dealt with 2 sprained ankles he had against the Colts. See, the kind of the knee issue. He got hit low again last week, but all signs are pointing, barring a setback, Manning is playing this week. And the guy I'm facing, and I'm really concerned because the guy I'm facing in my league this week, he's got Peyton Manning. I've had a pretty stacked roster myself, but he's got Peyton Manning. When you're playing against Peyton Manning, it's going to be a challenge any week. So I'm a little concerned about that. But Manning last week was 25-36, 330 yards, had 4 scores as well, 35 fantasy points. As long as he plays. Again, the matchup this week is really tough. Going up against Andy Reid, going up against the Chiefs, the only undefeated team in the league at 9-0. But it's in Denver. Peyton Manning's going to find a way. I think he's going to find a way to really test Andy Reid in this Chiefs defense. It's Peyton freaking Manning, for gosh sake. You know he's going to put up points when he's healthy. Keep rolling with Peyton Manning. RG3 had a big week last week. Normally not expecting him to have huge weeks normally, but he had a very solid week last week. Of course, he was going up against Minnesota on Thursday night, which anybody going up against Minnesota, you can start them because the Vikings defense is awful. But RG3 was 24 of 37, 281, had 3 touchdowns, also ran 7 times for 44 yards. So he still has the running ability. He's getting it slowly back with the knee getting a little bit healthier and that kind of thing. He's getting back into that groove again. So 33 fantasy points last week. The Eagles this week, again, I think you can keep rolling with RG3 as a solid start. I think certainly the Eagles D has not been great this year. And obviously with Washington's D not being great, the other guy you can start who was 4th in points last week, keep rolling with Nick Foles. I don't think Michael Vick, I've said it on here multiple times, I don't think he should take a single snap the rest of the year. I don't. Philly's got a good thing going. Chip Kelly, you got a good thing going with Nick Foles and with Riley Cooper. Don't break it up. Don't lose it. Nick Foles had 28 fantasy points last week. He was 12 of 18 for 228 with 3 touchdowns. Actually, he had the high passer rating of the week, 149.3 for Nick Foles. This guy is amazing, and Washington's butter defense is not going to be able to stop him next week. Seriously. He's a great start. He also ran 8 times for 38 yards. Keep rolling with Nick Foles. He's a great guy to have on your roster right now. Keep rolling Nick Foles out. Now, an intriguing name that's now on the roster that is probably available in a ton of leagues is Ryan Fitzpatrick of Tennessee. Now, Jake Locker, he had recently come back and looked strong again after the shot he took earlier in the year, the shot to the ribs, the chest injury and all that, and some other issues. But now a more serious issue. It's that dreaded Lisfranc injury in the foot that has knocked out ended a ton of NFL players' seasons and in some cases careers. You hope that's not the case for Jake Locker in terms of the career thing, but he is done for the year. Jake Locker is done for the year. So what does this mean for Tennessee? Well, obviously this means that Ryan Fitzpatrick is now the guy going forward. Now, I've always been very critical of Fitzpatrick in the past because he has been very hit or miss for me. Of course, that was in Buffalo, where quarterbacks tend to kind of go to die. Hopefully it didn't happen with E.J. Manuel because I want to see him succeed. But with Fitzpatrick, you never know what you're going to get. It all depends on whether or not he's going to get his receivers there really involved. It seemed to me when Fitzpatrick filled in for Locker the first time around, he really wasn't getting the receivers involved. It was all Chris Johnson, pound the rock, Chris Johnson, like get candy. It's Chris Johnson. But, he had a decent week last week. He was 22 of 33, 264, 2 touchdowns. He also ran for a touchdown, which tends to be Fitzpatrick's forte. He likes to run for touchdowns more often than Locker does. Now, he's going up against the Colts this week on Thursday night, and the Colts are just coming off that big letdown game against the Rams. They got absolutely torched by the Rams. So maybe I can only really look at Fitzpatrick as more of a number 2, number 3, or if you have Tony Romo, as a bye-week spot start for you. If you want a good Thursday night lead out of the box, maybe Fitzpatrick's the guy you plug in. But going forward, I'm really worried about him a little bit, and I'm worried about Tennessee's receivers. I had Kendall Wright on my team. Kendall Wright was doing outstanding with Jake Locker. He wasn't doing very well with Ryan Fitzpatrick. So it worries me about the receiver value going forward, like Kendall Wright, guys like Nate Washington, Delaney Walker, these guys. Obviously, they're not going to rely on Kenny Britt, but these receivers, what is their value now that Fitzpatrick's a quarterback? I can only really rate these guys, again, as number 2, number 3 options that are maybe on a week-by-week hit-or-miss basis or playing matchups. So again, Fitzpatrick this week, I can only rate him as a number 2 or bye-week fill-in because I want to see what he can do now being the full-time starter going forward. Just tempering my expectations on him a bit. Start your Seahawks this week. Start your Seahawks this week against the Minnesota Vikings. You know the Vikings defense is bad. If Washington can line them up for that much, you're starting your Seahawks. Russell Wilson is going to go buku on them. He had 25 points last week, 19 of 26, 287, 2 touchdowns. And oh, by the way, the word is out there. He might be getting a weapon named Percy Harvin back this week. You might have heard of him. Now, regarding Harvin, I've had him stashed on my bench the last few weeks, and talk has been that he's activated from the PUP list now, so he's active. But and he's ready to practice today, from what I heard. But Carroll didn't really say whether he's going to play or not. So you want to keep monitoring that situation. If he plays, a lot of people are saying he's going to be limited. But come on. This is Percy Harvin's former team. This is the Vikings. You don't think that Percy Harvin, in his first game back, doesn't want to torch his former team? I would say he does. So start your Seahawks this week. Start your Texans this week. The Raiders' defense has not been good of late. Case Keenum, again, a guy that should get the job the rest of the year in Houston. Matt Schaub shouldn't take another snap the rest of the year. I've said it over and over. Case Keenum is the real deal. He had 25 fantasy points last week. Was 22 of 43 for 201 with 3 touchdowns. Case Keenum is getting his receivers, his weapons involved. Like, he's getting Andre Johnson touchdowns, DeAndre Hopkins. He's getting these guys involved. And they're going to have to rely on the throw more because Arian Foster is now done for the year. Now, they still have Ben Tate at running back, but he's going to those ribs are going to be an issue every single week. So Case Keenum's going to have to throw the ball. He's going to have to feed those receivers. Keep rolling with him against the Raiders. Matthew Stafford had a big week last week with 24 fantasy points. Even though the Steelers matchup is tough, the Lions are always going to be hot. You want to keep rolling with him. Ryan Tannehill of Miami. Look, I'm just not sold on the Dolphins right now, okay? Honestly, I'm not. I want to make a video in here at some point addressing my thoughts on the whole Dolphins, locker room, Richie Incognito, Jonathan Martin thing. I want to make a video on that at some point, and maybe I will this week. But in general, to me, the Dolphins are a grease fire. They are just a mess. I predicted their loss to Tampa Bay. I knew that was going to happen. It's just an ugly distraction. And remember what I said last week? Blue and orange, teal and orange blob. That's what it is. That's the image I have in my mind of the Dolphins right now. Just this thing just hovering over the franchise. I don't like any Dolphins players right now in fantasy lineups. I really don't. My opponent had Lamar Miller last week. I wasn't worried because Miller's junk. They're still using Daniel Thomas for some reason, and the Dolphins are a joke. Ryan Tannehill's not a consistent option, and their receiving core, Dustin Keller out, Brandon Gibson out. Now they're using some guy named Rashard Matthews. Brian Hartline's a hit or miss every single week. I don't like it. So I don't like Ryan Tannehill. Now, I mentioned Kellen Clemens. Had a strong week last week. The thing with Kellen Clemens, though, he was only 9 of 16 last week. He didn't pass the ball a lot because they pounded the rock with Zach Stacy. But he had 247 yards with 2 touchdowns. He had 19 fantasy points. But really, is he reliable going forward? I don't know. I really, maybe as a bye-week fill-in for Week 12 or like a number 2 if you're playing 2 quarterback leagues. But I don't think you really trust Kellen Clemens full-time going forward. You're not going to see that out of Tavon Austin every single week. So, not sold on Kellen Clemens. Andy Dalton going up against Cleveland. That's not a bad matchup, although Cleveland, of course, Joe Hayden is going to be on A.J. Green a lot. So, I'm a little worried about that. Again, these are more number 2 guys that you're looking at now, like Carson Palmer. Now, Carson Palmer of Arizona, if you're looking for a bye-week fill-in this week, or if you're in 2 quarterback leagues and you start setting 2 quarterbacks, Carson Palmer, of course, has the dream matchup this week going up against Jacksonville. Now, Jacksonville, we also have to applaud Jacksonville. Yes, we do. We have to applaud Jacksonville because they finally got off the schneid. They got their first win of the season last week, along with Tampa Bay. So no more winless teams in the NFL. So the battle for the number 1 pick in the draft is still, I'm sure, between Jacksonville and Tampa Bay. But they got their first wins last week. But still, they're pretty bad. And Tampa, unfortunately, just lost Mike James for the year now. Fractured ankle is the news, by the way, with Mike James. So you can safely drop Mike James in fantasy leagues. We'll talk about that with running backs in a minute. But yeah, Carson Palmer, dream matchup this week. You want to start Carson Palmer for sure. Don't love Christian Ponder this week going up against Seattle. Look, he's earned the job back, apparently. Josh Freeman never worked out in Minnesota. So he's earned the job back, but going up against the Seahawks at Seattle, 12th man, Don't like it. Now, Andrew Luck going up against Tennessee on Thursday night. I think you can start Andrew Luck. I mean, he's not a must start for me, but I think you can keep rolling with him. I think the Colts really want to prove that Rams game was a fluke. It was an anomaly. It was just. You remember the Lemony Snicket movie, A Series of Unfortunate Events? That's what that game was for the Colts. It was a series of unfortunate events that just happened. Nobody knows why. Unexplainable. Or kind of like, Paranormal Activity, or the Scary Movie series. It's these unexplainable things that nobody knows why they happen, but they do. That was last week. That was the Rams beating the Colts 38-8. Why did that happen? We don't know. But should it have happened? No. But it happened. And now the Colts are going to go out on tomorrow night on Thursday Night Football on NFL Network in a hostile environment in Tennessee and try to prove to everyone, hey, we're the team that rolled past Seattle and San Francisco earlier in the year. We're not the team that lost to St. Louis this bad. So, it is kind of a head-scratcher that you knock off two of the stronger teams in the NFC West, and then you lose to the Rams. But, that's football. That, as Chris Berman says, that's why they play the game. So, Andrew Luck, again, not a must start, but I think you're still okay with them. The 3 picks last week were the big concern. He still puts up buku yardage. He still finds his weapons like T.Y. Hilton and Kobe Fleener and, trying to get Hayward Bay involved, Griff Whalen, these guys. So you can start Andrew Luck. I don't think you'll be disappointed if you do, because the Colts are going to play with so much fire and energy, I think, and passion, that they're going to want to prove people wrong. So keep that in mind. Scott Tolzien of Green Bay. The Packers now are just down on their luck. Speaking of not having luck, the Packers. They have no Aaron Rodgers. They have no Seneca Wallace now. He's done for the year. He's on IR now with a groin injury. He's done. No more Seneca Wallace. So they played Scott Tolzien last week. Tolzien was 24 of 39 for 280 yards with a touchdown and 2 picks, 14 fantasy points. So not an elite fantasy option by any stretch. But now they finally made the phone call that they should have made right when Aaron Rodgers went down. They finally made the phone call. Hey, Matt Flynn. Yeah, Ted Thompson, Packers general manager. How you doing? Hey, I don't know if you've noticed or if you've watched the games lately, but we're kind of in a bind here. Aaron's out with the collarbone thing, and now Seneca's done for the year with the groin, and we tried Tolzien, and he was okay, but not great. And here at the Packers, we need to be elite, we need to be great. So we know you've done great things for us before, and we'd love to have you come back and try out here at Green Bay. Is that something you're interested in? Okay. Uh-huh. Why did it take so long for us to call? Well, we wanted to give Scott a fair shot. We wanted to give him. I know, Matt. I know. I know. Okay. I know. Okay. I know. I know you said Packers franchise records. I know. It's in the books. We've seen it. I know. Just come on out. Come to the facility. If you like it, great. If not, we understand. And Scott will be the guy. Okay? Just, okay. So we'll see you then? Okay. Sounds good. All right. Thank you, Matt. Bye-bye. I don't know if the phone call actually went like that, but that's my best shot at trying to be Ted Thompson. But so monitor this situation. If it looks like, I don't think they would sign Matt Flynn for him not to be the guy now filling in while Aaron Rodgers is out. So if it were me, I'd go with Matt Flynn. But so again, but again with the Green Bay situation, I don't think any of these guys, Tolzien or Flynn, must start. Whoever starts against the Giants, not a must start option, not a guy you can plug in. Wait and see with Matt Flynn first before doing anything. Tolzien, I don't consider a starting option either. After that, there's a pretty big drop off. Jake Cutler, obviously, he's hurt again. He's already been ruled out for this week due to the ankle sprain. He's just been banged up all year. Josh McCown now gets a start against Baltimore, but that's a tough matchup for McCown. Again, I only see McCown as a number 2 or a bye-week fill-in option for you. Now, Phillip Rivers going up against Miami. Now, even though Rivers has been pretty strong this year, I'm not really sold on that matchup either. Surprisingly enough, the Dolphins, even though they're a mess, the Dolphins are 4th against the pass. So that's a tough matchup there for San Diego. Again, Rivers, I only see him as a number 2 play. Matt Ryan, I think, is only a number 2, but certainly with upside this week because, yeah, he's had some rough weeks lately, but that was mostly because of the matchups for Matt Ryan. Now he's got Roddy White back. He's trying to get Harry Douglas back involved. And they're playing Tampa this week. Tampa can get carved up. Their defense is still rough. I think Matt Ryan could have a big bounce-back week this week. I'm starting Matt Ryan in my league this week over Alex Smith. And I think that Ryan can certainly roll him out again this week as a spot start for you. Big Ben Roethlisberger going up against Detroit. Again, these are more number 2 guys. Joe Flacco. Won't have Tony Romo this week. E.J. Manuel going up against the Jets. I'm not sold on that. Now, Eli going up against Green Bay. He only had 9 fantasy points last week. But again, more of a number 2 play. Mike Glennon at Tampa Bay going up against Atlanta. I think it'd be a nice number 2 or bye-week fill-in because Atlanta's defense is horrible. I mentioned McCown. Terrell Pryor against the Texans. I don't like him. Oakland has just been a mess lately going forward. Cam Newton against the Patriots. Cam only had 5 fantasy points last week. Even though the Panthers are for real, they're winning games with defense. They're not winning it with Cam Newton. So I'm concerned about that. Not really sold on Cam. And after that, again, you're obviously not starting Chad Henne against Arizona. Colin Kaepernick. We got to talk about Colin Kaepernick because Cap has been a real fantasy disappointment for his owners. It's been very frustrating for his owners. He only had 2 fantasy points last week. He was 11-22 for 91 yards and a score, and only 4 rushes for 16 yards. He got Manningham back this week. He's going to get Crabtree back soon. He's trying hard to get Anquan Bolden involved. And Frank Gore's the anchor of the run game. So it's kind of hard to see Kaepernick struggling this much. But this week, going up against the Saints at New Orleans, that's an even tougher matchup. I have to say it. Colin Kaepernick is a bust alert this week. I really can't, and maybe for weeks going forward, because can you really trust a guy going forward that's putting up dinky numbers like this? Heck no. You're making a push for the playoffs. You're not going to start Colin Kaepernick. He's sucking like this? No. All right. Enough on quarterbacks. Let's go into running backs. Top guy last week. And really, can we really blame these guys because the Saints just completely destroyed the Cowboys last week? The top guys last week were 2 Saints. And actually, 3 Saints were in the top 5. I'm talking Pierre Thomas, Mark Ingram, and Darren Sproles. All these guys had buku weeks last week because Dallas couldn't stop a nosebleed. Pierre Thomas, 17 carries for 87 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Also caught all 7 passes for 24 yards and a score through the air, 22 fantasy points. Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram has been an afterthought all season. And finally, he managed to have a breakout week this week when probably nobody owned him. 14 carries for 145 yards and a score, and also had 2 catches for 15 yards. And Darren Sproles, who normally is the must-start guy every single week, only had 5 carries for 12 yards and a score, but again, did most of his damage through the air, 7 catches for 76 yards and a score, lost a fumble. All these guys had either close to 20 fantasy points or over it. Sproles ended up with 18. So what do you do with these guys this week going up against the Niners? Well, the Niners have been shown this season again that they can be run on. They're not that elite 49ers defense of years past. They can be run on. They've been gashed this season by teams. So if it were me, based on what we saw last week, I'd probably rate Thomas slightly ahead of Sproles because I think these guys are guys you can definitely start. And maybe I play Ingram if I'm desperate as a number 3 or a flex because, again, this was Ingram's first big game in a long time. So we really can't rely on Ingram to be a must-start guy this week. But if you're desperate looking for a flex option or you play 3 running backs, maybe you put in Ingram as a spot there, see if you can replicate that previous week. But I definitely start Pierre Thomas this week. I definitely start Darren Sproles. As I mentioned, start your Seahawks. You know you're starting beast mode every single week anyway with Marshawn Lynch. He's been my main guy this year. You can definitely start him against the Vikings this week. He had 21 fantasy points last week on 24 carries, $145 and a touchdown. Keep rolling with Marshawn Lynch. Keep rolling with Adrian Peterson. Even though the matchup is tough against Seattle, who else do the Vikings have? They don't have very many weapons outside of Adrian Peterson. Duh. That's why they couldn't trade him. Duh. Because he's their only weapon. Duh. That would have been team sacrifice. Duh. I mean, come on. That was just a bunch of ill-fated rumors. Rumor has it that just never accumulated to nothing. Duh. So, no. Adrian Peterson, you're fine to start him against Seattle, even with the tough matchup, because really, are you going to sit AP at this point in the season? Heck no. Now, a guy that I was able to get off the waiver wire and is making his first start for me this week as I'm making my push for the late season run, and a guy that hopefully you guys got a chance to jump on is Andre Brown. Touchdown downtown Andre Brown. The Giants, all the rumors throughout the week, and this is sometimes why you can't buy into rumors, all they said throughout the week was, well, Peyton Hillis and Brandon Jacobs are going to get the start and split time, but they will slowly work in Andre Brown slowly. Huh. Slowly? Heck no! Screw that! Andre Brown had 30 carries for 115 yards and a score last week. That's 17 fantasy points. And Green Bay's defense has been gashed against the run multiple times this season. If you want a solid number 2 the rest of the way, you need look no further than Andre Brown. He's a solid start going forward, as long as he stays healthy. LaShawn McCoy, you can keep rolling with him against the Skins. Start your Eagles against the Skins. McCoy had 15 fantasy points last week. He should have another big week this week. Gio Bernard, you know me. Love some Gio Bernard. 14 carries for 58 yards last week, but also had 8 catches for 37 yards last week. Plus receiving touchdown, 14 fantasy points. Cleveland this week, obviously I think Andy Dalton's going to struggle with Joe Hayden in that tough Brown secondary, so they're going to have to give the rock to Gio Bernard. I love Gio Bernard as a must-start at number 2 running back this week. Le'Veon Bell, who else are the Steelers going to hand the ball to? They have no one else besides Le'Veon Bell. 22 carries for 57 yards in the score last week. Also 3 catches for 39 yards last week. 14 fantasy points. Even though the matchup is tough with Detroit, I think you can keep rolling with Le'Veon Bell as an RB2. You won't have DeMarco Murray this week, so make sure you sit him. Maurice Jones-Drew, again, with Jacksonville, it's been so hit or miss this year. Their weapons are dwindling quickly. MJD is now kind of the only real reliable weapon that they have. Going up against that tough Cardinals defense, although they just got gashed by Ben Tate last week. So, again, I think you can use MJD as an RB2. He had 13 fantasy points last week. So, again, RB2. Alfred Morris of Washington, I like him as an RB2. Again, going up against the Eagles, 26 carries for $139. The only problem is his touchdowns get vultured, but that's the problem there. Again, you won't have Zach Stacy of the Rams this week. He's on bye. Now, Donald Brown of the Colts. Here's an intriguing name because we all know, well, at least most of us know, you're living under a rock, that right about now, Jim Irsay is probably regretting the phone call he made to one Trent Richardson to try to acquire him in that blockbuster trade where everyone freaked out and said, "Oh my gosh, the Colts just got Trent Richardson. They're going to the Super Bowl." Well, and then all of a sudden Trent Richardson starts running in. Let's put the brakes on Super Bowl, okay? Okay. What? Let's just put the brakes on Super Bowl. Because Trent Richardson has been nothing but a grade A disappointment. Donald Brown caught 5 passes for 64 yards and a touchdown last week. He doesn't run the ball very well either. So Trent Richardson really is the only ground and pound guy they have, unfortunately, with Vic Ballard out for the year. But Donald Brown is starting to become the main weapon. He's again fitting in this mold of guys like Gio Bernard, Darren Sproles, Danny Woodhead, we can name them off of these guys that I love that are strong flex plays. Jacquizz Rodgers. Donald Brown now is starting to kind of fall into that vein a little bit. So again, if you're in desperate need of a number 2, maybe borderline 2-3 running back or a flex play, maybe you plug in Donald Brown as a guy that can be that guy for you. He's playing Thursday night against Tennessee. Kind of a tough matchup, that Titans defense, but again, he's doing more than Trent Richardson right now. We have to say it. He's doing more than Trent Richardson. Just have to say it. We have to talk about the Tampa Bay running back situation because now, once again, it has taken a very disappointing and tragic turn. We know Doug Martin with a shoulder is out for the year. He's on IR. Now Mike James, done for the year, in all likelihood. I think he's on IR now. He fractured his ankle against the Dolphins. And that was so tough to see, not only for reality, for the Bucs situation getting worse and worse, but for James fantasy owners because he was really starting to gash the Dolphins on that first series. And all of a sudden, one bad move and crack. And I've had that happen. I've slightly broken my ankle before. I know what that feels like. I don't know how bad James's fracture is, but I know what that's like. It's the only broken one I've had in my whole life. I was in a cast for 6 weeks in high school, so I know what that's like. So what do we do now in terms of Tampa Bay? Who's the guy now to own in Tampa Bay? Some people are saying it's Brian Leonard. Some are saying it's Bobby Rainey. Bobby Rainey had the most fantasy points last week out of the bunch. He had 8 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown, plus a catch for 11 yards. That's 11 fantasy points. I'm trying to see what Leonard did. Leonard had 20 carries for 57 yards and 2 catches for 16 yards with 6 fantasy points. So he was kind of the main back, if you will. He got the ground and pound work. Bobby Rainey did most of his damage, and it did a little bit of his damage in the passing game, some on the ground as well. So it looks like, at least to me, this is going to be a committee, it looks like. But it looks like the guy you want to own is Brian Leonard. At least, again, for a number 3 or a flex option, I like Leonard going forward. But maybe Rainey, again, is a number 4 or a flex if you're desperate. That's the way I see the Tampa running backs right now going forward. I like Leonard a little bit more than I do Bobby Rainey. Ryan Matthews, Danny Woodhead going up against these Dolphins. You can keep rolling with them this week as must-start guys. Frank Gore going up against the Saints. Tough matchup, but again, at this point in the season, you probably can't afford to sit Frank Gore. He had 10 fantasy points last week, and keep rolling with him. D'Angelo Williams of Carolina had 8 carries for 46 yards and a touchdown last week, 10 fantasy points. But here's why, again, why I don't like Carolina's running backs. Because, A, it's another mess because Jonathan Stewart is back and Mike Tolbert can still score touchdowns. And, B, they're going up against the Patriots this week. And the Patriots have had a week to plan for Cam Newton and that Panthers defense. You don't think Bill Belichick has a game plan up his sleeve? Once again, I say, heck no. Not sold on the Panthers running backs this week. Reggie Bush of Detroit going up against Pittsburgh. I think you can keep rolling with him. He had 14 carries for $105 yards last week. Keep rolling with Reggie Bush. Keep rolling with No. Sean Moreno. Even though the matchup is tough against Kansas City, I still think Moreno's going to get the bulk of the work. He's at least a decent number 2, number 3 at best, or a flex option. At this point, again, we're kind of getting deep into the playing at this point. I'm not fond of Rashad Jennings this week of Oakland going up against that Houston defense. Even though he's probably going to be a starter again with McFadden now, I'm not really sold on that matchup. I mentioned Woodhead. Eddie Lacy of Green Bay going up against that Giants defense. Again, these are guys that are number 2, number 3 guys. Andre Ellington of Arizona. I think you can definitely roll with him again. Start your Cardinals this week against Jacksonville. I think Ellington's going to get the bulk of the work and going to be okay. Even though Mendenhall is back, I still like Ellington more going forward. You can definitely start him against the Jags. Ben Tate is a must-start at this point. As long as he's healthy, as long as he plays, you definitely start him against the Raiders this week. Ray Rice, again, what do we do with Ray Rice? He only had 5 fantasy points last week, 18 carries for 30 yards, 6 catches for 26. He's going up against the Bears this week. It's in Chicago. I'm not fond of Ray Rice. See, I hate to bench Ray Rice at this point going forward, but really, again, it's kind of like Colin Kaepernick. Can you afford to take minute points every single week? No, you can't. It may be high time, or past that, to bench Ray Rice. And again, after that, big drop-off here with these guys. Yeah, after that, it's a big drop-off. The Buffalo running back situation is a mess with Fred Jackson and C.J. Spiller. They're both bombs last week. And again, tough matchup with the Jets this week. I'm not fond of it. Chris Johnson, going up against the Colts Thursday night. He only had 5 fantasy points last week against Jacksonville, surprisingly. So again, a hit or miss number 2, in my opinion. Matt Forte against Baltimore. I think you can still go with Forte this week, even though he only had 4 points last week. And after that, really getting into names that really aren't worth starting on fantasy rosters. Okay, moving on to the wide receivers. Top wide out from last week. No shocker at this name on the list. And again, you're starting your Broncos every single week. Demaryius Thomas. 28 fantasy points last week, 7 catches, 108 yards with 3 touchdowns. Even though the matchup is tough against Kansas City in that defense, you can't afford to sit your Broncos. Demaryius Thomas, Wes Welker, Eric Decker. You're starting these guys this week. You're starting your studs. You're keeping them safe. Keep rolling with them going forward. Now, the surprising number 2 name, and I mentioned him. What do we do? What do we do when we look at Tavon Austin's numbers? I mentioned it. The Rams receivers really were nothing without Sam Bradford, and that is usually true. But somehow, Tavon Austin was able to have a buku week last week. But here's the problem again with Tavon Austin. He does a lot with little. And that's the risk, because if he doesn't get the yardage, if he doesn't get the touchdowns, he doesn't become fantasy relevant. He was only targeted 3 times last week. He had only 2 catches. Now, he had 138 yards because Tavon Austin is a 6 speedster freak that I watched play at West Virginia, and I saw that in him, and he had 2 touchdowns. And oh, by the way, he also had a sick 98-yard kick return touchdown, just burned the Colts. So, again, Tavon Austin, obviously you don't have him this week. He's on a bye this week, so you won't have Tavon Austin this week if you want to use him. I can only rate the Rams receivers, all of them. That includes Austin. That includes Chris Gibbons. That includes Austin Pettis, as desperation number 3 or flex plays, because, again, you don't know what's going to happen with these guys every single week. This could have been just a fluky performance. So, not sold on Tavon Austin. Brandon Marshall, keep rolling with the Bears this week. Even though Jay Cutler's out and Josh McCown's going to start, Brandon Marshall doesn't care who his quarterback is. Brandon Marshall is the main weapon in Chicago. Him and Alshon Jeffrey team to make a great combination. I like them both this week. Marshall last week had 7 catches for 139 yards with 2 touchdowns. Jeffrey had 9 catches for 114. Like them both this week as strong starting options for you. Now, I mentioned Rashard Matthews from Miami, who has come out of nowhere. Didn't even know who Rashard Matthews was last week. Didn't know his name. Didn't know he was on the Dolphins roster. But last week, came out of nowhere. He was targeted 14 times last week. Had 11 catches for $120 and 2 touchdowns, 24 fantasy points. 4th highest wide receiver scoring in the league. But here again is the thing with Miami receivers. That worries me about those of you who chase after the touchdowns and say, oh, I got to pick up Rashard Matthews. Oh, boy, 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 number 3 receiver. Oh, boy, 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 boy. Again, put the brakes on, because Brian Hartline in week 1, Brandon Gibson a couple weeks after that. It's usually a hit or miss guy every single week. There hasn't been one guy, and Mike Wallace has been fluky all season long. He took the money and ran to Miami. Gee, Mike, how's that working out for you? Here's the thing, it's not. So I'm just concerned, again, with the Dolphins going forward. Again, if you're desperate, maybe you look at Rashard Matthews as a number 4 or a flex. Just kind of take a wait-and-see approach. Put him on your scout team. That's a great thing to do. CBS Sports has this thing called their scout team, where you can scout out guys. I don't know if your league has it, but if your league is a scout team, put Rashard Matthews on your scout team, because just kind of take a wait-and-see, see if this trend continues with Tannehill, and if it does, then you make the jump on him as your number 3, maybe number 3, number 4 guy. So Just got to take a wait and see on him. Don't chase touchdowns. Now, a guy you do want to chase touchdowns with, however, is Riley Cooper. And I mentioned Riley Cooper. Him and Nick Foles, you got to keep the good thing going. Like that song, you know, the theme song, The Good Times. You know, these are the good times. Well, it's good times if you got Nick Foles and Riley Cooper on your fantasy roster because they're going buku right now. Cooper had 3 catches for 102 yards with 2 touchdowns last week. Now, he's an example of a receiver that can do a lot with little and make something of it. He gets targeted more than Tavon Austin. He's a weapon with Nick Foles in the offense. He finds a way. So, and again, going up against Washington this week in that butter defense, Riley Cooper is going to find a way. So, keep rolling with Riley Cooper. AJ Green. Boy, oh boy, were fantasy owners fortunate last week because AJ Green was staring at a letdown week last week, and had it not been for that fluky touchdown play, they say it on NFL Countdown all the time. Defenses, rule number 1, kids. What do you do on a Hail Mary? You knock it down! Well, James Ahedigbo of the Ravens didn't knock it down. He tipped it up in the air. A.J. Green caught it in the back of the end zone. Touchdown. Saved A.J. Green's fantasy day. Almost saved the Bengals, going on to lose in overtime. But A.J. Green's owners were saved by that play. 8 catches, 151 yards with the touchdown, 21 fantasy points instead of 9. So, what do you do with A.J. Green this week? I don't think you can sit him. Yes, he's going up against Joe Hayden and the Browns. Tough matchup. I get it. But you can't afford to sit A.J. Green. You want to keep rolling with your studs. Start A.J. Green. I don't have to tell you to keep starting Calvin Johnson. He had 20 points last week. Even going up against Pittsburgh, you're starting Calvin Johnson. I like Pierre Garçon this week. Going up against the Eagles, he had 17 points last week. He's clearly RG3's preferred weapon. 7 catches, 119 yards and a touchdown. Keep rolling with him. Marcus Colston. Marcus Colston, again, it's been a lot of people were talking about dropping Marcus Colston from their leagues last week. That's ridiculous. He's Drew Brees' main weapon outside of Jimmy Graham, okay? You know, he found a way to bounce back. 7 catches, 107 yards and a touchdown, 16 fantasy points. Marcus Colston, you can put him back in your lineups if you benched him. You can keep rolling with him. He's fine. Now, the situation in Seattle. Golden Tate, Jermaine Kearse, Doug Baldwin. These guys have been nice fill-ins for Seattle. In the meanwhile, Golden Tate had a big week last week with 6 catches, 106 yards and a touchdown, 16 points. Kearse had 13 points last week, 3 catches, 75 yards and a score. But here's the thing. Percy Harvin could be coming back this week. And all likelihood we're hearing that Percy Harvin's going to come back this week. So if Harvin does come back this week, and all signs are pointing to he's going to, I'm starting Percy Harvin as my number 3 receiver. I think he's going to be still a strong option in the Seattle offense. He might be limited in his first game back, but I still think that's going to be a good option for you. So then what do you do with Golden Tate? What do you do with Jermaine Kearse? Jermaine Kearse and Doug Baldwin, I think, drop back into less fantasy relevancy than Golden Tate. I think Golden Tate could still be potentially a number 3 or a flex play. Harvin's obviously going to become a must-start once he really shows his mettle. But I still think Golden Tate can be serviceable. So for now, keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on Harvin's situation if he plays. Now, if he doesn't play, Tate's obviously a must-start. Kearse may be a number 3 or a flex. And maybe Baldwin kind of that falls in that same boat. But as long as Harvin plays, then he gets the bump up in fantasy value and everyone else kind of goes down a notch. Andre Johnson, Deshaun Jackson. You're starting these 2 this week. Great matchups this week. Love their matchups this week. Andre Roberts of Arizona, he's not targeted enough. That's the issue I have with Andre Roberts. But he did have 5 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown last week. They're playing the Jags this week. Who knows, he might get a touchdown. Maybe a desperation number 3 or a flex. Kenny Stills of the Saints. He had a touchdown last week, but again, he's not targeted enough. I wouldn't really pick him up unless you're desperate. T.Y. Hilton has become a stud. You're starting T.Y. Hilton. He had 7 catches for $130 last week. Ruben Randall of the Giants, I'm concerned with him. I've already dropped him from my team because, again, he's now losing targets again to Victor Cruz, Akeem Nicks, these guys. He only had 3 catches for 50 yards last week. He had a touchdown, but not sold on Ruben Randall going forward. Now, Alshon Jeffrey, I mentioned, I like him. What do we do with Jarrett Boykin? What do we do now with these Green Bay receivers now that they are starting Matt Flynn, potentially, over Scott Tolzien? What do we do with Jarrett Boykin? Well, the Green Bay receiving core is decimated as it is. No Randall Cobb. James Jones is hit or miss. No Jermichael Finley. So, Jarrett Boykin, though, he's still going to be a strong weapon, it looks like. He was targeted 13 times last week. He had 8 catches for 112 yards. That's 11 points. I still think Jarrett Boykin is serviceable, but again, I can only rate him as number 3 because we have to see what kind of rapport he'll develop with Matt Flynn. So, kind of take a wait and see again on Boykin, but if you have him, maybe put him as number 3 and see what happens. Antonio Brown of Pittsburgh. He's Big Ben's main weapon. Start him. Keep rolling with him. Torrey Smith of Baltimore. He's Joe Flacco's main weapon. Now, the concern last week was he was targeted 14 times. He only caught 5 of them. But he still had a touchdown. It's Torrey Smith. You can't sit Torrey Smith. You're starting him against Chicago. Jericho Cotchery, again, he's only fantasy relevant if he scores touchdowns. Doesn't get enough targets. He had 9 fantasy points last week for the Steelers, but not fantasy relevant enough. I don't like him. Terrence Williams of Dallas. You won't have your Dallas receivers this week, so sit them. Again, after this, big drop-off. Kendall Wright of Tennessee. Again, I mentioned the Tennessee receivers, the drop-off now they're going to have now that Fitzpatrick's a quarterback. Probably the most reliable receiver they're going to look at, though, is Kendall Wright. He's been the most consistent no matter who his quarterback has been. So, again, I rate Kendall Wright as more of a number 3 or a flex play. See what happens with Fitzpatrick going forward. Put him on your scout team. See what happens with Kendall Wright. And, again, kind of a big drop-off after that. So, now for teams coming off the bye weeks, Patriots this week, Danny Amendola, Aaron Dobson, Julian Edelman. Going up against the Panthers this week, that's a real tough matchup. I have Keenan Allen, I have Riley Cooper on my team, and I have Percy Harvin. I'm likely rolling out those 3 guys this week, but if Harvin doesn't play, I'll be forced to put in Amendola as a start, but he's probably going to have probably the best week of the Patriots receivers this week, going up against that tough Panthers D. The Panthers have not met a passing offense like the Patriots this season, and Amendola is back to full health, and he's their main weapon. So, again, if you're desperate, again, number 3, I see Amendola, number 2, number 3 play this week. If Harvin's out and you're looking to debate on the 2, if Harvin doesn't play, put in Danny Amendola. So I like that. So other than that, it's a big drop-off at this point. Yeah, at this point, don't look at any of their big names. What do we do with Jordy Nelson now? He only had 6 catches for 56 yards last week. But again, you really can't sit Jordy Nelson at this point. He's too reliant. Instead of starting Eric Decker. Don't have Dez Bryant this week. Make sure you sit him. Now, James Jones did come back last week. He had 4 catches for 44 yards. But again, with Flynn at quarterback, it's still kind of a mystery. So you're worried about him. And, yeah, after that, big drop-off in names. Not really reliable after that. So, okay. Moving right along now. Looking now at tight ends. Top tight ends last week. One name we normally are used to seeing, and one name that was kind of a surprise and came out of left field. Julius Thomas, obviously, of Denver, has been one of the nice surprises at tight end this season. He's becoming one of the elite tight ends. It, of course, helps us Peyton Manning, your quarterback, but Peyton Manning likes to utilize his tight ends in Indianapolis, so he's definitely doing the same in Denver. Thomas last week, 3 catches, 96 yards in the score. Keep rolling with him against the Chiefs. Now, the surprising name was John Carlson of Minnesota. A Viking? Wah? A Viking beside Adrian Peterson is fantasy relevant? Yes. Because remember when John Carlson played in Seattle and he was like a touchdown monster every single week usually? Minnesota, Christian Ponder finds a way to get his tight ends involved. With Kyle Rudolph scoring touchdowns, he's fantasy relevant. Now, he's out with a foot injury, so enter Carlson, who caught all 7 of Christian Ponder's targets last week for 98 yards and a touchdown, 15 fantasy points. Look, if you're hurting at tight end, if you need a second option, I got him off his insurance from the wire because I was wondering whether Vernon Davis would play this week because he got concussed last week. Now, it looks like Davis is going to play this week. But in the event that he doesn't, I grabbed John Carlson off the waiver wire as insurance. So now it's a tough matchup for Carlson this week because he is playing his former team. He is playing Seattle in Seattle. So you think the Seahawks aren't going to find a way to shut him down? Probably. But again, you know, as long as he gets the tight ends involved, it's not a bad opportunity. If you're looking as a number 2 tight end or a flex play again, Carlson could be your guy. Delaney Walker of Tennessee, again, I'm concerned about Tennessee with the whole Fitzpatrick situation. But again, maybe a desperate number 2 or flex play at tight end. He had a touchdown last week. Jordan Reed of Washington has become a star at tight end as well. 6 catches for 62 yards and a score last week. I really like Jordan Reed. You can start him this week against the Eagles. Another guy to watch is Rob Hausler of Arizona. I wasn't really sold on Arizona's tight ends at the start of the year, but I tell you what, Hausler has been a scoring machine these past few weeks. He got his first NFL touchdown a week ago. Now he gets another one last week, 4 catches, 57 yards with a score, 11 fantasy points. Going up against the Jags this week. Who knows? He could sneak another one in if the Cards get in the red zone. So, again, if you're desperate at tight end, if you don't have Jason Witten this week, if you don't have Jared Cook or Lance Kendricks, maybe Hausler's the guy you plug in, get off the wire, plug him in as a spot start for you, and hope he gets a touchdown for you. Brandon Pettigrew of Detroit had a nice week last week. All 5 catches, he caught them all 5 of his targets for 70 yards last week. Now, Pettigrew doesn't really find the end zone very often. That's his big bugaboo. But, again, if you're needing a number 2 tight end or a flex play or a spot start, maybe look at Pettigrew as a guy going up against the Steelers this week, a spot start for you this week. Keep rolling with Antonio Gates. And after Gates, it's a pretty big drop-off. Don't like Dallas Clark, Ryan Griffin of Houston. He only got a touchdown. These guys only caught touchdown passes, These guys you don't normally rely on. Now, Tyler Eifert of Cincinnati was targeted 10 times last week, but only caught 3 balls. That's worrisome. He had 55 yards, but so Eifert's really kind of a hit and miss. But going up against Cleveland, and remember, who's Cleveland going to be focused on? Maybe focus on a guy named A.J. Green. I think we've heard of him. He caught a Hail Mary last week. So this opens the door for guys like Tyler Eifert, like Jermaine Gresham, like Gio, like even the law firm. This opens up the opportunity for them. So Tyler Eifert, again, could be a number 2 or a spot start for you this week. Jimmy Graham, yeah, he only had 5 catches, 59 yards last week. But Jimmy Graham's a must start. You know this. Kobe Fleener, I'm concerned about. Kobe Fleener he's kind of like Trent Richardson. He hasn't taken the opportunity that's been in front of him and running with it. He was targeted 10 times last week. He only made 4 catches for 33 yards. He caught a 2-point conversion for the second straight week. Yay, ring-a-ding-ding. But, if you don't put up touchdowns and points as a tight end, you're not fantasy relevant, and Fleener can't do that. He doesn't find the end zone enough. So I'm really worried about that. I can only look at Fleener again as a number 2 or a spot start. Tony Gonzalez, same thing. People are starting to focus on Tony Gonzalez because he's the only weapon now in Atlanta. He only had 3 catches for 29 yards last week. I'm not sold on him going forward. After that, it's a big drop-off. We're not starting these guys. Scott Chandler, Charles Clay. Don't have Jason Witten. Martellus Bennett's hit or miss. Not sold on those guys. Okay. Real quick, as we always do when we end the show, we do quick guys that I like at kicker and DST this week. The red-hot guy right now at kicker is Stephen Hauschka of Seattle. I mean, oh my gosh. This guy, the Seahawks offense is strong. He had 17 fantasy points last week, including a 53-yard field goal for the field goal. That's 2 extra points in a CBS league. That's huge. And this week, great matchup against the Vikings. We want to roll out Stephen Hauschka this week. I like Phil Dawson to San Francisco this week. They should be in a shootout with the Saints this week, even though the matchup is tough on paper. Dawson has a big leg. He also nailed a 53-yarder last week. I like him this week. Alex Henry of Philadelphia going up against Washington. Love that matchup this week. You can roll out with him. Jay Feely of Arizona going up against the Jags. Obviously, start your Cardinals this week. Sebastian Janikowski of Oakland. Tougher matchup against Houston, but I think he'll get his opportunities to kick a little more. I think with that tough Texans defense, I think you can roll with Janikowski. He's got a big leg. Nick Novak of San Diego going against Miami. Love the matchup there. I think you can definitely go with him. Now, there's a situation in New Orleans, and it affects my team as well. Garrett Hartley, the Saints kicker, has really struggled of late. He had 7 fantasy points this week, made all those extra points against Dallas, but he's missed a lot of opportunities. It was field goals of late after a strong start. They were trying out kickers behind him, so Garrett Hartley might lose his job. Keep monitor on that. If he does, I'll have to find a new kicker off the wire myself, so keep your eye on that. But other than that, Randy Bullock of Houston, he's back in good graces. He had a big week. He had 6 points last week. He's starting to get more consistent again. He has a great matchup with Oakland this week. I really like him. Matt Bryant of Atlanta going up against Tampa Bay. That's a good matchup. And after that, that's pretty much it. Okay. And then DSTs for the week that have good matchups that I like this week. Giants D obviously going up against Green Bay. That's a great matchup. They're starting Matt Flynn, so that's a great matchup. They had 22 fantasy points last week. Cardinals D going up against the Jags, obviously. Ravens D going up against the Bears. Not too bad of a matchup if you're desperate because, again, they're starting Josh McCown. So, Seahawks going up against Minnesota, obviously, is a must start. Saints going up against the Niners is a must start. Titans going up against the Colts. Maybe if you're desperate, but maybe they can duplicate what the Rams did last week. We'll see what happens. Eagles D against Washington, to me, is a must start. Texans D against Oakland, must start. Bills D against the Jets could be a sneaky start because Geno Smith's really been frustrating lately, so that could be a sneaky fill-in play for you. And Chargers D against Miami. I think that's a good play as well. Again, if you're desperate, but like I said, Miami's a mess, so that's how I see that. Okay, guys, that is a wrap for this week. Again, I appreciate you guys, viewing the vids. I don't get a whole lot of feedback from you guys. I do try to check, though. And I check my alerts, check my email, check that as often as I can. But again, you're always welcome. Feel free. Leave comments or any questions down below if you have any thoughts on any players that you may have or situations that you're in this week. Go get them in Week 11. Good luck this week. Keep trying to make that playoff push. Or if you're at the bottom of the barrel, just keep trying for pride. Keep playing for pride. Fantasy is a fun game, and you want to keep playing and battling no matter where you're at. So good luck this week. God bless, and we'll see you guys again for the Week 11 and Week 12 edition of the FFSR, your home for fantasy football advice. Thanks, guys.